All right, we're back with Motor Learning for Coaches here with Casey and Harjeev and Andy Bass, and it'd be fun to, I guess, first start with Casey. I know it's maybe get an update in the summer, maybe recruiting season. What do you got going with UMBC going into year two?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting time for volleyball coaches every year. Just your athletes go home, and depending on things like funding and support, you'll get them back sometime between the end of June to beginning of August. And that difference is profound when you start considering things like workload ratios and ramping back up into a season that starts very quickly after they return. In August for our team will return. Most of our athletes will return very beginning of August. And so there's a whole confluence of things that we have to consider over the summer. How do we facilitate as much intrinsic motivation to get the necessary workload in to be prepared to train? How do we overcome some obstacles in terms of training opportunities like facilities and equipment and personnel that may be necessary to both tax the body from a strength conditioning standpoint and get the necessary opportunities from a volleyball standpoint. So a lot of it ends up, as so much this does, it circles back to cultural considerations. How do we foster the right cultural values throughout the year so that when we send them off and we're not legally allowed to monitor them, making sure that they're or hoping that they're positioning themselves individually and as a group to be as good as possible, as early as possible, without any additional injury concerns in terms of return to play back here coming up in August. So a lot of it is sitting on our hands and with our fingers crossed, hoping that they're doing the right stuff. A little bit of his NCAA calendar is not real well set up for sports like women's volleyball, and I think both of the soccers. There's a couple other sports you just get into competition so quickly, and the return is so close to that return to competition that the summer matters a lot, and we have very little influence over it. So you try to influence it indirectly through cultural stuff during the year and checking in and stuff like that. So it's a nerve-wracking time for us. And obviously that's on top of all the recruiting stuff that's going to go on here in just a couple of days, June 15th, once that starts. So yeah.
Well, hopefully the retrievers are doing the right stuff when they're away and come back ready to go. But so for today, we had a topic which definitely want to hear from everybody, but maybe Casey, you can introduce something I think coaches are pretty familiar with, maybe one of the motor learning terms people have at least heard or have some idea of what it is. It's observational learning. Maybe you can start out telling us what that means.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's pretty straightforward. I think it expresses itself in a couple different ways. I think the one that people probably relate to most intuitively is going to be just demonstration. Things where a lot of times as coaches are giving feedback or cueing or introducing a concept, they'll orient their body or coordinate their movements in a way that provides an additional, informational stimulus in the form of a demonstration. Hey, if I'm telling you that I'd like you to do X, Y, and Z movement coordination, as I'm telling you also, we may also refer to other to other athletes. So we may ask somebody else to demonstrate. Or the other one that comes up quite a bit is the use of video. So video playback, and so we do video review. That can be observational learning of themselves. That would be like a sub-classification. It can be observational learning of other people. But essentially it's the idea that we're going to make adaptations in our behavior based on things we see visually from the observation of a demonstration or a model or some sort. And this is something that I think is ever present in coaching. We all do it, whether we realize we do it or not. And understanding it better could be really useful in terms of making sure we're getting the most appropriate benefits with the fewest amount of negative consequences. And the line of research or the paper, the group, there's lots of people that have it's a well-read subject or area of motor behavior literature. The group that I reference back to in the paper I reference back to most often is Mark Williams, who has been on the podcast. He's pretty special. And one of his probably most frequent collaborators, Nikki Hodges, And in 2005, they wrote a paper. I forget the exact title. I think it's something along the lines of practice, instruction, and skill acquisition, challenging tradition and myth, or something like that. And it was written in 2005. And the first myth that they introduce is the idea that demonstration or observational learning is inherently needed for the maximization of motor learning benefits. And they go through some stuff there in research that they had conducted, other people had conducted, where that would question that idea that not only that is it fundamentally necessary to quality motor learning, but also the ways that we typically innately go about it are those the best ways? And we can get into those in a bit. But when I think of observational learning, I think of demonstrations, I think of video review. I think it's something that is really critical for coaches to understand, and best practices would be really good for coaches to understand because it's so ubiquitous. It's so common in coaching. This isn't like a fun thing that you tack on occasionally. Observational learning is something that is probably leveraged in most sport and skill development practices around the world at all times to some degree.
Yeah, that's a good start. Maybe Andy, you could take us to what's, we have those three buckets. Maybe is there one that's most effective, or what are some ways you've seen coaches use observational learning effectively, and maybe some ways we've seen it be harmful?
Sure. With observational learning, I think there are some components to keep in mind, either when using it, if you or the coach or another athlete or the physical demonstration or even via video, is first, if you're showing a video, don't talk during the video. Find the athlete to what they're about to see or what you're trying to cue them to, and then let the video run. I think, especially in basketball and football, I think this is really difficult where coaches will want to talk over the film. And that kind of creates this interference effect with what the athlete is trying to process and then what they're also trying to hear verbally from us. So prime them for what they're about to see and then let the video run. And if you need to jump in, press pause. The other thing too is, especially in baseball, I think when you have a lot of asymmetrical movements, actually like a right-handed hitter would benefit from seeing a left-handed hitter swing or the mirror image of themselves swinging. The other thing too is, especially this is more maybe novices or beginners, they can benefit from seeing experts, but also people of their peers. And going back and forth, we've talked about variability on this podcast, even varying the skill level of the demonstration can be very helpful as well. And the last one that comes to mind here before I send it back to you all is, there's this egocentric point of view and allocentric point of view. Big words, but basically the idea that we have GoPros now, which is awesome. And if we can see video from more like a GoPro perspective, where it's like the POV shot, the first person, that tends to be, when I use the word tends to be more beneficial than an allocentric point of view that would be like in football, where it's typically a video camera up high on the bleachers showing the film. Now, pretty hard to get full egocentric video in a football game. Sometimes you have to do that to see the whole field. But if we have the capability or technology to be able to use GoPro video, that first person perspective, that egocentric point of view tends to be more beneficial than an allocentric point of view.
Pretty sure Casey's always been egocentric, as far as I can remember.
Take it easy. Take it easy.
No, that's helpful to know. I'm curious just for the idea of not speaking during the video review. Would you say this? I picture also coaches during demonstration, kind of talking through it, or even when they're, hey, watch this player, watch how is it the same kind of principle?
Correct. And especially if you or the coach are kind of breaking it down and you're the one showing it, we know the ideas of part practice where the sum is not equal to the whole. So instead of like showing your hand needs to go here, your hip needs to go here as you were doing it, just present the whole information. Present you going through it as full speed as you can, you being the coach, and prime the athlete to what they should pay attention to versus kind of chunking it into that part practice point of view. So yeah, certainly if you are demonstrating, say, hey, when I do this, I want you to look at X or Y or whatever it is, go through it, don't speak, then reprocess.
Harjeev, I saw in the paper that Casey referenced from Mark Williams, they reference, I think, Dr. Wolf and the idea of having the observation go to more the external or the shape of the result versus just because I think the most common is people will do what Andy was talking about, right? Look at their hips or look at the way. What do you think on that? Is giving them an external focus, even in observational learning, the way to go, or is it maybe something more on the way someone's moving, more internal?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. I think coming from her lab, I'm always going to be a big proponent of making everything as external as possible. And I think there's a time and place for being more internal, but I think this goes along the lines of like what's the meaning? Like, what are we trying to get out of this this session? Oftentimes, and we've talked about it here as well, is like the timing of when you're watching film. Is it like before you're about to go on the court, or is it after? Like, for example, you can prime the system by showing video beforehand before you go on to to blend. That may be a sense of an external focus coming into play. So there's a lot of unknowns, I think, when it comes to observational learning, because we think about observational learning as like, oh, we're going to watch film, or we're going to watch an expert, do this or do that. We never think about like practicing in groups. Like, that's observational learning as well, right? Like with the timing of that is critical. And sometimes, like, again, I go back to like the meaning of what we're trying to get to. It's like the concept of a swish in basketball. Like, if I have a basketball in my hand on a basketball court, I'm gonna aim to swish a shot. But the same thing if I have a piece of paper and I'm tossing it into a garbage can, I'm still gonna want to swish that shot. So what is the underlying meaning that we're trying to get out? I think coaches sometimes, and maybe you guys as coaches probably know better, but like coaches sometimes think that just getting the information out there is all we need to do. But it's like that, let's say, it's like the practice variability effect. It's like what Andy mentioned is like, what is the underlying sort of I guess construct that we're trying to get to through the different variations of our film. And I think like that is an important consideration. But I think at the end of the day, back to your original question, all of this is a mechanism, I think, to potentially have more external, foci, because you're always more goal oriented, right? It's like it's about what happened and not about like really how it happened. Let the how kind of be explained by the personnel that you're working with. But yeah, it doesn't, I don't think that's a good answer, but I think like that starts the conversation of observational learning is actually very unknown, I think, right now. All we know is that it's helpful in some capacity, and it bodes well with physical practice. That's pretty much all we know, I think, right now in the literature. But yeah, I feel like I didn't answer your question, but I feel like that's a good starting point.
No, some good stuff in there. What about, I'm curious on the priming idea. How could I could see maybe the NBA, there's probably some nice technology there, but maybe is there some practical ways that high school level, college level, they can use this priming idea? Like what would that look like? How would you execute that?
Yeah, so like in basketball, for example, if you go to any pregame, you'll see like players typically watch film after their 20-minute shoot around time. And selfishly, I don't know the reasoning behind that. It's typically like a preparation, I guess, for something. So something that I've thought about is like watching film in regards to maybe personnel you're about to play, or things that are important for us to play well today, right before you have your 20-minute time slot, so that within the 20-minute time slot, there's some sort of thinking going on regarding who you're going to play against, what you're going to do in about 2 hours before we play. I think like that is interesting. So like, and there's no technology involved. It's showing film on your laptop, just like showing video. And it can be of the team you're playing. It can be of some sort of scheme that you want to do. It can be, you know, an advantage like, oh, if I drive to the basket and I go this way, I'm more likely to get fouled because of the personnel. Just to kind of get them thinking as they kind of go through their shoot around time, as well as, you know, for the game. Now in volleyball, you know, I think it's been done where, you know, we can show film prior to a match. Even in practice, you guys have the delayed film stuff, which is helpful. I think that's kind of what I was getting at in terms of priming, but I think it also depends on the information, right? So if I show like the scouting report before I go and play a match in volleyball, like, are my players really going to, you know, remember the stuff? Because typically scouting reports through film will take a certain amount of time, but what time is really optimal, right? Like, those are the types of questions that I think are important for coaches to consider, but no technology involved. It's really just video.
Yeah, that's good. The common one I see, and I don't know if I assume it's used in baseball, but Casey, I see it a lot, especially in indoor volleyball. The video delay. Could you go into that, maybe how you think that could be used effectively, or if you think it is something that is valuable?
Yeah, I think, as hard you mentioned, there's value. Now we're dealing in degrees here, and so could we do something that's more valuable? I think the traditional use of the video delay, TiVo system, whatever you want to call it, is we're going to have a performer who's working on a skill or an action or concept or something like that, and we're going to train the camera on them, and we're going to have the monitor that displays displaying to them, and they're going to get an opportunity, and then they turn to the monitor and they observe, and maybe there's some conversation with the coach, or, you know, whatever, they may do it on their own, and then they're going to kind of reorganize their next, you know, attempt based on the information that the feedback that they got from that display. There's some concerns with that. In my opinion, we actually have gone away from that almost entirely. We don't do that at all. As Harjeep touched on, and as I think the Hodges and Williams article touches on, there's a concern with where the focus of attention goes when they're watching their own kinematics. You're really running a risk that they are distracted by the way they move, and so they're very quickly, if you just let them go and then you ask them, what did you see, almost immediately they're saying, well, my elbow or my foot or they're very quick to look at the way that they coordinate their movement. And that's in my opinion, I agree with Harji. I'm comfortable saying that while there are some probably more nuance to this than I would like to admit, I just external whenever possible. So that is a huge concern for me. The way we kind of reconceptualized that video delay was just, hey, we know the movement effect is something that we want them sensitive to from a focus of attention standpoint. So when we, for example, we're training a passer, we would train the camera on the next contact, which in this case would be the setter, but the monitor would still be facing the passer. And it was really striking. The first time we did this, before we did it, we would ask the passer, hey, how did the setter look there? And they could give us either a really poor description or just plain inaccurate description. Oh, they were doing this and they weren't doing that at all. And there was a massively blunted sensitivity to the effect of what their movement in relationship to the outcome. And so we would ask them, hey, pay attention to that. And then when we trained the camera on the setter and showed the monitor to the passer, they pretty quickly saw, whoa, she's moving backwards. She looks really uncomfortable a lot. Or it looks like she's having to crouch down because it's so low. And we allowed for this big space of self-organization to reorganize the movement, to address the movement effect. And we saw that at a couple different areas or levels, whatever you call it. We did it for the setters by training the camera on the hitters. They look comfortable, like they're quote unquote in rhythm. And that concept for me came straight from this article, and I had read it, second or third or 12th time a number of years back. And the line of research, or the research project that was done by Williams and Hodges in that group, where they looked at I think it was, they're trying to, I'm not real familiar with soccer, but they're trying to kick a curved kick, in soccer. And they studied a couple of different groups, one that showed just the kinematics of the performer, one that showed the kinematics and the outcome, one that showed just the outcome. And I think there was a control group as well. And interestingly, the group that only saw the effect, the outcome of the shape that they were looking for, that they were trying to mimic, they weren't able to see the kinematics. They had the greatest learning effect. And so we thought, okay, let's just get off their kinematics and onto the effect. And it's been well received in our gym. And I think it's something that we as coaches have evaluated. Hey, there's some value to this. I don't think it's earth shattering, but that's one of the areas that observational learning, I think, is easy upgrade, in my opinion. Really easy. Like if you have the system to do that, you have the app, the Bus to Move app and the iPad, or you got the TiVo system, just change where you're pointing the camera. And you do that, and all of a sudden, this external focus of attention becomes much more organic and natural for them to get oriented towards, as opposed to when you put it on them, they love looking at how they move, and that's a concern, because then they'll start thinking about how they move, and that's bad.
Yeah.
Can I quickly add something? I think you brought up some really good points, Casey. One of the things that I've seen work is we no longer ask players about their own movements. It's like, why did you do certain things based on contextual factors of other opponents? So does that correlate to an external focus? I don't know. I would assume so, but they did these moves because of this. They did these routes because of this. One other thing that's helped is two things. One thing is you can take a clip from the beginning, show them, and then take a clip at the end and tell them to figure out the middle part. So it's like this prediction aspect of it. And the other thing was put players in groups and allow them to kind of dyad train themselves with film, no matter what length it is. And then finally, I think what's worked is like instead of showing clips, you show 2 to 3 minute segments. And now you have to talk about the underlying stuff, whatever, philosophy or goals that you have as a group. And I think like all those things have helped in some capacity to kind of first understand, schemes and ideas. At least in basketball, that's a big thing. And then also as like, someone in a role like myself, I like to watch film from not clip by clip, but like a longer duration when we think about like, skill capacity and practice design and all the sports science, these things. So it's also important to look at that even as coaches, is like, stop like focusing on these clips here and there, like look at the big picture. Look at the rally, for example. I know rallies don't really last 3 or 4 minutes, but like, that's what I'm trying to get at. But yeah, just wanted to add that as like little tools that coaches can use.
Yeah. No, it reminds me, Andy, of what Andy, you had said about the GoPro view, the egocentric view, and how it sounds like that would maybe eliminate, and maybe that's some of the reason why it works, is you're eliminating this body focus, self-focus. And really, I think from that, I haven't really watched a lot, but you would only see external, right? But I haven't seen that done in a delay sort of setting. Maybe that's, you watch it after, or I guess, how have you seen it used?
Yeah, and the GoPro's got some nuance to it, because you're pretty much only able to see one person doing one thing. That's why middle ground, like an allocentric view, as in like bird's eye view, you can see everything going on around you, right? So you have that information. I think the best I've seen the GoPro integrated is for quarterbacks, particularly as they go through like their checkdowns and progressions. I think that's I think that's probably where the most benefit would be. Maybe for a passer or a server in volleyball, like see where their eyes are attuning to, like where their head is moving. I think it'd be a really interesting thing to look at gaze behavior. I know it's not actually, gaze behavior like with pupillometry, but for somebody that doesn't have access to like visual gaze glasses, like that would be an interesting way to see where the head is moving, particularly if maybe a server's having some yips, or maybe they're not particularly going to the proper place on the court. that would be an interesting way to see, hey, where are you actually tuning your information to? So I think the GoPro may not be great, like widespread, but if you as the coach have a particular issue with a player, I think that would be a great time to utilize that to really get really specific and very isolated issue with a player.
Mm. So I feel like we covered some of the demonstration and a lot of the film. What about the third bucket we didn't hit as much? I think coaches use it a lot, watch Sally over there. I guess what's ways that can be used? And even I guess maybe from a film perspective of, I know Casey, I've heard you talk about, watch this player, give you an idea as a way to explore someone different than yourself. I think a lot of what we talked about so far is watching yourself. And what about watching others?
Yeah, no, there's a lot to that. That's a probably long conversation when we talk about, who should you be watching and how should you be watching and how should that process be kind of structured and framed, whether it's by the observer, by the coach. One of the things that is mentioned in the paper we've kind of been discussing is there's tons of value in observing the learning process. So there's tons of value in watching somebody learn, if that makes any sense. So it's not so much you're trying to do what they do from a kinematic standpoint or coordination standpoint, but you are getting really good feedback information to help organize your own learning process, your own search, if that makes any sense. So observing the learning process, this is something that I think is huge, like in camp settings. One of the things that you have to make sure, and this is more of like a sociocultural concern, but just make sure that if you are going to bring somebody up and have them demonstrate, instead of having an expert coach do it, having a camper who doesn't know what they're doing, and you're going to kind of walk them through the learning process, make sure they're comfortable with that. Ask them, because that can be, kind of overwhelming, overstimulating psychologically for a young person who's maybe a little bit insecure about their ability in front of a big group. But that's huge if they can observe the learning process. So it's not so much do it as this person does it, it's try to get some good information from this process that this person is going through, because you're going to be going through a similar process. So that's a big one. I think when we do watch other people, there's some considerations that you should make. I'm not advocating for one better than the other, but do you want the person to have similar characteristics? And you could slice that up over a bunch of different dimensions. Do you want them to have similar, body characteristics, height and length, and do you want them to see similar experiential characteristics? Like, do you want them to be at the same level? Do you want them to be way above? I tend to advocate for more of people who maybe a model that they could see themselves in. I remember, when I was growing up, Lloyd Ball was the setter for the national team. I'm 6'4" and not a good athlete. Lloyd Ball was, I think, maybe 6'9" and an incredible athlete. As fun as it was to watch him play, I don't know if I probably wasn't capable of doing all the things that he was doing, even just physiologically. So I tend to like that, but just make sure that there's some purpose into why you're deciding on those things. I think the default is let's just do what the best do. And I think there's probably some nuance to that beyond just, hey, let's do as the Olympians do. And is
that why you used to watch me? I get it now.
Yeah, except you were a good jumper, and what, 5'9"? What do you know?
I got up to 5'10".
Yeah. No, then the last thing, I think you touched on it. I really think for us, this is where we've landed largely in respect to observational learning in our program, at least structured observational learning. Harjit talked about, this is something that goes on. Like, think of skateboarding. Most skateboarders don't have a coach. Like, they don't have a formal coach. A lot of their learning happens observationally, informally. They go to the skate park and they see, like, wow, I want to do like that guy. I want to try that trick, or I want to maybe, that sort of thing. So it happens kind of indiscriminately, whether we structure it or not. But when we do structure it in here at UMBC, I think what we're looking to do is we're trying to create maybe some inspiration for trying different things and trying different ways, and avoiding the, hey, here's Bolash from Poland, you have to set just like her because she's the best setter in the world. More so like, hey, what are some things you notice about her? And what are some things you notice about Jordan Poulter? And what are some things you notice about Ognievich from Serbia? And what are the similarities? What are the differences? And let's go explore in those dimensions. You notice these things are similar. Let's mess around with some stuff there. You notice these things were different. Let's go mess around with some stuff there. And so a lot of that is my responsibility in framing. So when I cut up a montage of these setters, I have to be really careful how I frame it. It's not go do as they do. It's observe these people, try to come up, like as you watch them, what are the things they do differently? What are the things they do the same? And let those, whatever answers you come up with, those are some pretty good dimensions for us to try, a bandwidth of things. And so we use that a decent amount, whether it's like completely formal where we go into data play and we cut up a montage, or we're going, hey, let's pull up this person, that person, this person, and let's see if they, let's see if you notice some stuff, because I may notice some stuff and you notice it too. If not, that's probably not super useful. But and then let's go down in the gym and remember how she tried this and the other girl tried something different. Let's try the whole spectrum of those things across the dimension. And that speaks to a broader philosophical value that we would have in terms of like learning is about exploration and trying to find a way to get each learner to self-organize. And if you don't subscribe to those same beliefs or same philosophy, that may not be of great use to you, and that's totally fine. But that's how we would leverage that. It's just using observational learning as inspiration to explore, not as a model to emulate.
Yeah, I like that a lot. We're up against our time. Andy and Harjeev, you guys, anything to close? Anything to take us home with?
I would definitely encourage any coach that I'm not going to dive into this, but within my dissertation, I had learners looking at learners, and they did get better. And if we think about the idea of differential learning, which is the idea of variation to kind of piece apart what works and what doesn't work, works the same way in observational learning. Look at experts, look at learners, look at your peers. Peer modeling has a ton of research to back it. So encourage your athletes to look at other athletes, those that look like them, those that don't look like them. I mean that in terms of like body movement. Casey is correct. When you tend to look at a person that looks like you, I'm not referring to like a sociocultural perspective, but that has seemed to show some benefits. So wide range of observational learning, just like differential learning with the aqua bags, variation is the spice of life. There's a reason why that's a phrase.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add, I really liked your points there, Casey and Andy. I think it really, this really comes down to the coach. Oftentimes, I always look at it a way where like players leave teams and get better. And like you think about it when you kind of peel all the layers, it's like we think when we show film and we do all this, we have this like idea of what the skill is. And so therefore we'll limit everything possible for this player X to become very good at this X skill. I like the idea of like observational learning being a bandwidth. So it's like you're giving them, let's just say it's the skill of driving to the basket. You're giving them different perspectives and players that are, on par with whatever player you're working with, and letting them kind of figure it out. And I think you get the best of a lot of different worlds that way. And I think that I really like the development piece to this. So, showing like a LeBron James from his rookie year all the way to his third year, what changed in those 2 years. That gives a lot of perspective to your rookie player, who then says, okay, this is what 3-4 years looks like, and this is what the best player in the league currently is doing. And so again, I think it's the onus of the coach to, again, whatever philosophy you're all about. I think looking at skill, not just like this one way, but this like there's many ways to do said skill, and let your players sort of figure that out before you restrict them to what you think is the way to go. So I think that's probably what a good message is for coaches.
Yeah, lots of great stuff. I think I love this topic because it's something like you guys mentioned, it's done so often, but it's not done the way you guys are talking about. And I think this is a a better direction and an upgrade to the way people are currently using observational learning. So I hope people can go out and explore it and use it with their players.